transaction tips for discount brokerages and for sale by owner, or FSBOs as we call them. So what are some of the tips? A lot of realtors tend to be afraid to go into these. So how can we help them out?
Well, for one, I think a lot of our agents should adjust their perception. When it comes to for sale by owners, that is generally the idea that a lot of realtors are scared of them or don't like to work with them because of various reasons. Some feel it's insurance coverage. Some realtors feel like maybe they're being, their buyer could be misled by what the for sale by owner is telling the buying party. I, for one, in my career, I loved for sale by owners because I knew that if there was that perception out there and a percentage of the realtors in the industry aren't taking their clients to those homes, it's an advantage for my buyer.
Absolutely.
Less competition, less people that they got to battle to duke it out with. A little bit less of a chance that we'll get into a bidding war. Right? So advantage to my buyer. A couple things to remember, though, is that when you're dealing with a for sale by owner, and sometimes some of the discount brokerage listings, a lot of times there won't be a lockbox at the residence. For sale by owner, often they have to meet you there, let you in, they kind of grill you, you give them their card, they talk a little bit, they try and extract some information about what the market's doing out of you. Bottom line is you've got to plan in advance to show one of these listings. So try and treat it like a tenant occupied situation. Give it a full day's notice before you want access to that property. One thing is that for sale by owner person might have been scorned in the past by a realtor. Maybe they had a bad situation. Maybe they just don't trust anybody. You actually have a unique position that you can change their perception. Give them notice. Be courteous.
Lots of notice.
Show up on time. Try and give them maybe a 15 or 20-minute heads up when you're leaving one of your appointments that you're going to be there soon. Do the little things. You'd be surprised that if they don't have luck selling their home by themselves, you might actually get a call to list their property when they finally decide to give up. On the flip side, too, they might see how professional you are, and they might think to themselves, well, this has been quite the hassle trying to sell my own home. I'm going to hire a realtor to help me buy my next one. You could be the person that gets that call simply from being professional, being on time, and being punctual.
Well, and I always found, too, to take the time to explain what the process of the showing is.
Yes.
That you are an agency with your client, they've agreed to work with you, all of those things. I've even offered to say, if you'd like, I'll come the day before, we can chat about everything. I'll tell you what I'm allowed to tell you about my clients, put you at ease, make sure you understand what the process will be if we go to write a contract.
Yes.
Because a lot of them have, most of them have no idea what happens on their side. And for exactly the reasons you just stated, the ability at some point to either, once they sell their place, maybe they need a realtor to buy, or if they can't sell it, which we all know about 80 to 90% of all for sale by owners end up on MLS.
Right.
So somebody's going to end up with a listing, a very good chance. So treat them right.
Yeah, that's a very great tip. I like, that's very ninja of you to be going the day before to explain things. I mean, it does a couple of things. It spreads knowledge, gets them up to where they should be for when a sale does come in their home. A little bit more understanding, and you're helping the next agent that might also bring an offer. It's just to give back. It's very ninja of you.
And I always wanted to explain the advantages of, although they have to be there to open the house for us, why they shouldn't be there while I show their home professionally.
Yes.
Because they'll get a better showing. The people will be able to look in closets, open cupboards, things they won't do if you're standing there talking about how wonderful your house is.
Yes.
They're just going to race through the house and leave, and you're going to lose a good showing with a client.
Yes. We've all shown a property where there's been a tenant-occupied home, and your clients walk in and they feel like they're in the principal's office. They don't want to say anything. They don't want to do anything, and they pretty much just want to rush out. So, yeah, I like the fact that you've done that in your career, and it's a great tip for our agents for sure.
So when we get to commissions, I mean, if it's a true for sale by owner, I know there's an education process, or if it's listed with a brokerage that's offering perhaps less than what you have in your buyer brokerage agreement.
Yes.
Because we know there is no word, we call it a discount brokerage, but of course all commissions are negotiable. So
100%. Yep.
if they want to work for nothing, they're certainly allowed to work for nothing.
Yes.
I didn't, you don't.
No.
So.
You know, it all comes down to communication, and number one thing as well is remember your fiduciary duties.
Yep.
Whether a property is going to pay you $500 or $15,000, We have a duty to show our clients anything that does represent a property that might be the right one for them.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, I loved for sale by owners just for that reason is whenever they offered a less commission, I could go in and I would always set up these meetings to meet them in person whenever possible. There's a couple different reasons for that. But number one, I can sit and communicate with them and tell them I have that agreement, much like you alluded to earlier, with my buyer, and I'm going to earn a certain amount of income from representing them in a transaction. Now, when a seller learns that if they don't end up paying that ultimately, your buyer has to pay it, and they understand that that could bump your buyer up from buying that property, they will almost always work with you. I've never had a situation where they haven't worked with me, and I even know of some agents that have negotiated a higher commission, basically negotiated what they had in their buyer brokerage, but there is a little bit of added risk when you're dealing with a for sale by owner that you have to kind of think about. You have to be covered. You have to make sure that you're comfortable doing the transaction, and if things do go sideways, you've earned enough that you can cover yourself in your day in court. Now, REAX will come into your defense in a lot of situations, but on the flip side, if you didn't do things properly, you're putting yourself at risk. And it's funny because a lot of realtors will avoid showing those properties because they don't meet what's in their buyer agreement.
Yes.
Because their clients might not necessarily have enough income to buy the property, cover their closing costs, have their comfort money, and pay your commission. But if you can negotiate that in,
absolutely,
you can
becomes part of the mortgage.
Win-win for everybody.
Absolutely.
Right? It's a win-win for everybody. So when it comes to that, with the commissions, if you do make a purchase contract and you're going to be increasing your commissions versus what's posted on the MLS, I've always written it right into the terms of the deal.
Yep.
It's been a discussion I've had. We've put it in the offer. My buyers know exactly what's going on every step of the way. We go over that part carefully in the terms section of the contract. And when I sit with the selling party, I explain it in great detail so that they understand everything. Something is, we can get into the technical terms. We, as managers, help a lot of our agents daily with these questions. But ultimately, you're going to post in the terms what the existing commission is. You're going to post the additional commission that is being agreed to and the summary of what the total commission will be.
Yep.
And that's essentially how you protect yourself and make sure that it's all completely clear for all parties involved.
Well, and of course, there is that way. There is the other way, of course, doing it using the seller customer status fee agreement,
Yes.
which depending if you've gauged the person on the other side and they seem to be maybe more of an accountant, engineering, teacher type that would like a pure process, then I always found that was very good. I wanted them in customer status, so you had the ability to agree to everything before you ever presented your contract.
Yes.
But really, it comes down to judging the seller and what is going to be the best way to present your offer on behalf of your client.
Yes.
And you've got to educate the seller a lot of times when they're working sometimes with a mere posting brokerage. They have very little information on the process.
Yes.
So being able to talk to them about deposits and the fact that we're going to be holding the deposit. Talking with them also about how the waiver process works and making sure that when they get that, they're going to file copies with their lawyer. And you're almost handling both sides.
Yes.
But on that side, definitely from a customer point of view, you're not giving advice, you're just explaining processes to make sure that the paperwork moves smoothly and efficiently still on both sides.
Yes.
And explaining conveyancing.
What's interesting is on that point, when I've dealt with a for sale by owner in the past, I've done the exact thing that you just alluded to. I would often present the customer status prior to ever showing them the offer.
Yes.
A lot of people, as soon as they see a price and a possession date on an offer, everything else just tunes out.
It always does.
Everything else just fades to the background, and they can't remember details that are very important, but all they saw was the two components. So if you get a chance to explain customer status, explain FinTrack, explain consumer relationships, get that out of the way, and you almost make it a prerequisite. I'm going to explain how this works to you first, and once we understand that, I'm going to get to this offer. You can kind of set the precedent. Right?
Well, and the advantage we have when we put them in customer status, if we've done consumer relationships and they want to be represented now, great. If they want to go to customer status, we don't need to do FinTrack with them.
Right.
Because they're our customer. They're not our client. And we're only required to FinTrack our clients. So little things to to make your process simpler, make sure they're comfortable.
Yes.
You may not want to enter into agency with them.
Yes.
Because your buyer may have already, you'll have had that discussion, I'm sure. And if they want you to stay in sole agency with them,
That's right.
then that's what we're going to do.
Yep. Yep. It's like you said earlier, you know, you meet with these people and you gauge the situation as you go. And you, of course, do the right paperwork to back yourself, and away you go.
So the important things on the offer, and I know we kind of jumped ahead a little bit there, but
Yep.
talk a little bit more about how the process of your educating, how would you present the CMA? Because we can present the data to them, but how do you do it so that you don't go over that line of entering into agency and no longer being in customer status?
Right. Well, to start with that, a little bit of understanding for some of our agents about how the CMAs work with a lot of the discount brokerages and, of course, for sale by owner. There isn't one. A lot of times, there is no CMA that's been done. So a seller might say...
No. The seller has looked on MLS, and
Of
they know
course.
what everything is selling for.
That house down the street,
Yeah.
that was the same color and the same frontage as theirs, you know.
800 square feet bigger with a walkout basement.
There you go.
But mine's worth the same.
So understanding that a lot of times with the for sale by owners and some of the discount brokerages, a true CMA was never done. A lot of times an agent has never actually visited their home. They've just ran some stats based on square footage, based on the area. They don't know the quality of the kitchen. They don't know the condition of the floors and the paint. They don't know if the house has had evidence of flood throughout in some way, shape, or form. They don't know any of that. So to give an analysis and have an expectation that your home is worth X amount when a professional has never visited your home, for me, that's scary. As a buying agent coming in, I can actually discuss with my buyer before I go in there about which properties that we'd like to agree on that are relevant, that are going to be relevant to our argument, to get where we need to be, and present that. You can actually do a bit of a CMA right in front of the seller, and you have an opportunity here to show facts, show actual pieces of paper with real properties on it that you feel are comparable. And you can actually sway their perception on what their home value is at. Now be prepared. It might not happen that day. You might plant some information into their brains. They may politely tell you where to go, in not so many words, and leave, and then you might get a call a few days later saying, you know what, is your client still around?
Yep.
Because the information had a chance to actually sink in, especially for one that's been on the market for a little while and hasn't sold. So when you go to present an offer, understanding that you can actually do a bit of a CMA in front of them on your buyer's behalf, educate the seller a little bit, and then present an offer that's justified, that's a great strategy to employ.
Well, and I love the way you just said present, because to me, when you're working, and I always tried to, with a self-represented seller,
Yes.
was present in person. Because so much body language, of course, is the way we communicate.
Yes.
They need to see you, learn to trust what you're telling you, and make sure you can look them in the eye and understand if they got it.
Yes.
We know when we're explaining the terms, and I know that you're going to talk about some of the stuff you want to put in, and make sure it gets fully explained to
Yes.
the seller so that they understand what they're going to be signing.
Yes, 100%. A seller often doesn't know what they don't know, right?
I find if they don't know it, they always don't know. But
they have a perception on how things will go when they list their home.
Yes.
And when agents come into their home and when buyers come into their home, they have their own perception on how things will go, but they won't often understand all the intricacies and all the value that we bring, and in particular, you know, the questions that they'll need to answer, the things that they'll need to back up. When you do present the offer, you're going to want to make sure that your buyer understands that the measurements that the seller has put on the MLS, on Kijiji, however they're representing their home, they could be completely false. I mean, this kind of comes back to RMS. You know, a seller themselves, they're not going to be answering to that higher power. They're going to put whatever they feel is necessary that they think was within reason. When they did that addition and they didn't get permits for it 8 years ago, and they thought that it was a 20 by 20 addition, and it turns out to be 16 by 14 for some reason, and now they've grossly overstated their size. They might have bought their home based on a builder's plan. They don't have the builder's plan anymore, but they thought they bought a 2,400 square foot home. Really, they bought 2,122. There's a difference there. The buyer needs the protection here.
Yep.
Not so much the seller at all. So if you need to put into the contract a clause about measurements, if you need to do extra conditions for different inspections, you need to be prepared to put things into that contract that you might not necessarily put into a contract that's, a home that's being sold through a realtor. Now, whenever we do buy homes through realtors, we always want to be careful still. But you have to be extra careful when you're dealing with a for sale by owner. That's for sure.
Make the calls to the city, because you brought it up, making sure permits.
Yep.
They don't have the same disclosure requirements.
Yep.
So you got to protect.
You do. Simple things like setting the expectation with that seller that the home will be vacant. The home will not have any debris left over. There'll be no garbage kicking around in the garage. That pile of bricks that are out beside the home, if your buyer wants them gone, you've got to make sure that stuff like that finds its way into the contract so that it's fully enforceable, so that the expectation is set.
So they should go to Russ's terms contract class this month.
There we go.
There we go.
Yep. Things like whenever you work with a realtor, it's kind of expected that that realtor is educating their seller on cleaning the property. It's believed that the seller will tell the selling realtor will tell their client, you see that fridge right there? That's the same one that's got to be there when you give up possession. You can't switch it out for the one in the garage. When you're working with a for sale by owner, they may not understand that. They might think, well, we gave them a fridge. There was a fridge in the contract. We gave them that old beat up fridge that's in the garage. You've got to set that expectation. You may wish to take down serial numbers. You may wish to you do want to have that discussion with that seller. You also want to put it in writing that the chattels are going to be as viewed on the day you saw the home. And if you feel it necessary, include them. The model name, the serial number, etc. Do everything that you think you need to protect your buyer in these situations.
Ask the question, do they own the appliances?
Very good point.
Make sure
yes.
nothing is under contract to the brick or whoever.
Yep.
Because they went out and bought some and thought, well, we'll pay them off, and then they forget to tell their lawyer, and
That's
the
right.
brick bangs on your door and wants their appliances back.
100%. Yep. And we don't see that too often, but it's totally possible. So you've got to ask those questions for sure. If you're buying a property through a for sale by owner and there's a tenant situation in the property, you got to be very careful there too. You may have to educate that seller on what is going to happen with that tenant. You have to ask those questions. You have to get all the details of that lease, everything in writing, so your buyer can make an informed decision. And if you do proceed with that property, you've got to be very careful with the expectations set and what's in the contract so that neither the buyer nor the seller go through that grief. Here's the thing, a lot of things in the contracts are enforceable. And if they go to small claims court, it could be a toss-up as to who wins. But the worst part about it is it could be tied up in court for months on months. Nobody wins. So do your due diligence, protect your buyer at all times. And in doing so, you also protect you.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, I think we covered it pretty good. And of course, the last and best piece of advice, quick connect. Call your broker manager.
Yes.
If you're writing your first one, submit it to us ahead of time. We'll have a look at it, make sure it's covered. We'll ask you some questions to see if you've asked the right questions.
Yes.
Our job is to help protect you, so use that safety net.
I definitely appreciate when an agent hits us knowing the answers, but they need
Yep.
a little bit of backup. Sometimes we tweak things and make them better. A lot of times our agents knock it out of the park with their own first try. And the difference is now when they're delivering that to the selling party, they have the confidence to deliver it
Absolutely.
in a way that's believable, in a way that's true, and in a way that inspires the seller to do a deal with your buyer. So,
Yep, which is what we all want at the end of the day.
100%.
Look at that. Now, Lindsay, Kirsten, take note. It's like 10:27. So everybody have a great week. Remember some of the upcoming classes. Check out the CIR Stampede Party, our upcoming corn maze, and have a look at the new charity section information. Look up
Yes.
Kirsten's emails that come out. It's the best thing we've done ever at CIR. Have a great week.
Thanks for joining us.